Hello and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Jacqueline Dorsey of Lean Frontiers and I'll serve as your host today. I'm excited to bring to you today a short webinar on Toyota Kata and the TWI connection facilitated by Beth Carrington from the W3 Group and Oscar Roach from the TWI Institute Australia. So they together will be delivering our short presentation. We will set aside time for some Q&A, so if you have questions, please submit them using the toolbar and I'll field those questions towards the end. So for now, let me turn things over to Beth.
And you could join us today. We invite everyone to listen in on a conversation of the connection between Toyota Kata and TWI. We're going to be delving into the behavioral connection between Toyota Kata and TWI, and I, for one, expect to learn a lot. So we plan on holding the conversation. We're going to strive for 40 minutes, but based on the last call Esther and I had, it might be a struggle. But again, that's what we're striving for. We'll have this conversation for about 40 minutes and then open it up for 20 minutes of Q&A. So with that, I think I'll begin. Oscar, you and I talked about our assumptions going into this presentation, and we had a couple in mind as we designed it. So our first assumption was most people joining the call are unfamiliar with Toyota Kata. So we're going to spend some time explaining what Toyota Kata is. And then our second assumption is most people joining this call are familiar with TWI and are probably TWI practitioners. So those were our two assumptions, and so we'll spend a little less time delving into TWI and more time talking about that connection between TWI and Toyota Kata. So good morning, I'm Beth Carrington. I'm with the W3 Group. I'm one of the business partners at W3. I've been an active consultant since 1999. I have 25 plus years experience as a lean practitioner. I am a Toyota Kata master coach, but I am also a lifelong learner. Wanted to say thanks to Oscar in particular for joining me today. Really appreciate it, considering it's about 5 a.m. in Sydney. Still dark out. Well, I'm here on the West Coast, so it's mid-morning for me, and I expect others are from around the world, so welcome to the event. I'm happy to say that I'm really glad Mike introduced us, Oscar. I was able to meet back in about 2008 as he was just publishing his about 6 years research of Toyota, not the tools of Toyota, but really the management system that he discovered, or uncovered, I should say, at Toyota. The subtitle of this is Managing People for Improvement, Adaptiveness, and Superior Results. So I met Mike in about 2008. I was lucky enough to have an opportunity to learn and practice the routines with Mike and my business partners, Jeff Kane, Jay Vanderswag, and Bill Costantino. Oscar, I think you know Bill. I think you've exchanged emails and some content. Yes. We have all learned, practiced, and coached together in multiple organizations, mastering the routines of the improvement kata and coaching kata ourselves as we helped others master them. We have also developed a model on how organizations can deploy this way of acting, integrating the behaviors into their daily routines. So with that, Oscar, I'm going to turn it over to you, say a few words and introduce yourself, and then we'll begin more in the conversation.
So good morning, everyone. I'm Oscar Roach, and thank you very much for joining this, and trust you'll learn as much as I did the other day when I was talking to Beth and we were preparing this. So I'm one of the directors of the Institute in Australia. We're a global affiliate of the Institute in the USA up in Syracuse. Some of you, if you're practitioners, will have met Scott and the guys up there, so yeah, we're a part of that organisation. So I've made developing skills and assisting companies reach their business improvement goals my main focus over the last 10 years. Studying methods and develop my specific skills in order to assist companies achieve genuine and sustained improvement. So this is very much focused on working with the frontline leaders and their managers, and in any business applying the right principles and tools in the right place with the right people is the key to bringing lasting improvement in the workplace. The more of this I do, TWI, any of that sort of stuff, I find that it's more and more about timing and the position of the mind as such, of management's mind in particular. So I believe passionately that these leaders have been ignored, the frontline leaders, for many years, and now is the time to support their development in order for businesses to survive and develop. The practical nature of the TWI program makes it the ideal vehicle to commence leader capability development. And I certainly try as much as I can to practice those skills in my everyday life. So I'll now hand back to Beth, and she will get started on the content. Thank you.
All right. Excellent. Thanks for asking.
Beth, I'll sound.
How about now, Oscar?
No, right now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. I think I accidentally hit my mute button. I'm sorry about that. So let's start the conversation with an overview of Toyota Kata and TWI, and then we'll talk about the connection. I'll start with kind of a question in terms of what is Kata. We use that word. Mike used it in the title of his book. It's used to within the context of the book. And for our purposes, a kata is a routine. It's something you practice so that it becomes habitual. I think there's a translation that says it's kata is actually a way of doing. And you know, we have certain routines and way of doing to learn music on a piano or learn how to drive a car. We believe there are routines that can be practiced to learn a way of managing and a way of doing continuous improvement. And Oscar, before our conversation last week, I thought this was the greatest connection between TK and TWI in terms of, you know, how chunking, learn a new skill, how you break it into smaller pieces, you know, and I equated it to the job instruction aspect of TWI. But after our conversations, I'm not sure that's the strongest relationship between TK and TWI. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something, I mean, my journey with TWI started in 2008 or 2009, I think it was. And certainly in this country, and I've been to the summit, you know, America 3 or 4 times now, and the perspective I get very much is that people are almost stuck in job instruction and see that as 80% of what TWI is all about. And I've spoken to Jim Hunsinger, the Lean Frontiers guys, about this and how the emphasis of the summit is on JI. To me, the biggest power of the strongest, most powerful part of TWI is not job instruction, but actually job relations. And the reason for that is that, and I'll talk about this more in detail later, but the job relations model is based on the premise that a good leader gets results through people. And that's a critical aspect of this, because at the very end of the day, the improvement that's coming in a Kata-driven organisation, or it doesn't really matter whether it's Kata-driven or any other form of continuous improvement, the actual change and the actual doing is not generally by the practitioner or the leader, if you like. They have to get their results, the results the organisation wants, through other people. So job relations is to me is pivotal. It's pivotal in not only in Kata but in any organisation that's driving change. Most of the time, the change driver is not actually the one who has to change, and that's where I believe the strongest link is.
Yeah. And that, to me, that was just eye-opening. That was, my greatest epiphany. As I'm learning more from you about TWI, I hadn't put that job relations aspect as a major role, but it really is. I mean, you have to prepare people for change, and that's what CI, in particular Kata, is all about.
Exactly, and people, I think a lot of people understand that people need to be prepared for change, but it's how do you do it?
Right.
And the job relations gives you a vehicle for actually doing it. Apply the 4 foundations. Use the 4-step method when you have a people problem, because you will, absolutely guaranteed you will have people problems, and use the 4-step method when you do. And it gives you a vehicle for actually preparing people for change rather than just saying, well, it's important, we need to do it, which I think most people understand. But the JR provides you with that opportunity and that vehicle.
Excellent. Okay, well, great. I'm going to continue on with some more conversation about Toyota Kata in particular and what the routines are that Mike operationalized in the book Toyota Kata. So the routines, or katas, there are 2 main elements. There's the improvement kata. These are the routines that the learner, or what I like to call a process owner, the natural process owner would go through, the 4 steps they would go through to begin to understand and improve their process. Along the way, they are coached, and there is some instruction done during the initial phases, and then there is a very specific coaching kata, a coaching routine, that's used in this final step of the improvement kata. Let me just walk through those relatively quickly. I'll start with the improvement kata, and then we'll cover the coaching kata. The kata, it's 4 subroutines, basically starting with an understanding of the direction. Asking and answering the question, where does this process to be at some point in the future to meet the operational goals and objectives, or organization's goals and objectives. The next routine is to grasp your current condition as it relates to that direction, and then establish that next target condition, that iterative interim step on your way to the final destination. And then once you have a condition, you can identify the obstacles that are in your way from achieving target condition and begin to experiment through a series of quick cycles, plan, do, check, act, repeated over and over again to overcome those obstacles so the target condition can be achieved. Another way to look at it is in this kind of linear fashion. We start out here understanding the vision of the organization and the larger organizational challenges. Again, what are you striving to achieve? Grasp the current condition, set your target condition, then identify obstacles and experiment your way to overcome those obstacles. Right, so we have out here's kind of as we understand it and believe it to be, as a task for leaders, right? Establishing the organization's strategic concept, their overall direction, a vision, decades out there, where do we want the organization to be, bringing it in real in terms of a time-based challenge, that 1 to 2 year breakthrough objective the organization has to achieve. Then the task for managers is this day-to-day coaching of the application of the improvement kata in their area or level of responsibility to make that challenge become a reality. And so the process owner will be going through these 4 steps, and along the way they are coached so that they can gain mastery over those 4 routines. Right? The kata, the routine, gives a structured routine to practice. Then there's daily repetition of those routines with coached corrective feedback And with that, then mastery can be obtained. To get that coaching, there is a very specific coaching kata or coaching routine. It represents a way of thinking through a way of acting. So here's another way to look at it, right? Where we've got our current condition, we're on our way to our target condition. The learner is doing daily experiments to overcome obstacles on their way to that target condition. And the coach is there every day going through these 5 categories of questions, right? Starting out with this question about what are you striving for? What is your target condition? Then there's the routine of what's the whole condition now, so you reflect and dwell on where you are. You have a conversation about what obstacles do you think are preventing you from reaching the target condition, and then you pick the one that you're addressing, and then the coach asks, what's your next step? What's your experiment? And then what do you expect? So there's a hypothesis. I expect to make this change, and I expect this to happen. So it's teaching, this pattern we're teaching is really based on the scientific method. And then the last question the coach would reflect with learners, how quickly can we go and see what we have learned from taking that step? And this routine is repeated daily with the learner so that it begins to embed itself as just a habitual way of thinking and acting. Here's
So Beth, can I just stop there?
Please do interrupt. That's great.
So just if you can give us a little bit more detail on who, at this level, who's the learner here, and when that experiment provides some success and the obstacle is moved, then what happens?
That's a good question. So that's, we identify through experimentation the learner, the natural process owner, we'll call it, at whatever process level you are at. So this might be a team leader, right, at the process level, working with their team. Their direct manager, their boss, is their coach. This is a chain of command activity. It's a manager teaching their direct report a way of thinking and acting. It doesn't come in sideways from, say, a staff-led operation, Oscar. It's really that or process owner learning about their process, learning the improvement routine, being coached by their direct supervisor, and every once in a while, this person's, the coach's boss, comes as a second coach. Okay. And the second coach is there to teach the coach how to coach, and the coach is there to teach the learner the routines of the improvement kata. So this learner would do daily experiments. Hopefully many of those experiments would be refuted, right? So they're learning new things. But once in a while, right, you get an experiment that works. That means we have identified a change we need to embed in that process. And Oscar, I think that's where your conversation comes in around TWI.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
I think from my experience, which is early, I'm very early in my learning, that we seem to do that part fairly well. Do the bit you've got on the screen there now fairly well, conduct experiments, and we get the occasional success, which is good. And that's in many organisations where it stops. We think that's the end of the road. But in reality, we've got potentially one person who's on board with the change, the learner. Now we've got to get the rest of the work team at that process level, whether that be on the factory floor or frontline leader or middle manager, doesn't matter. But at that process level where the change, the successful experiment has occurred, we've now got to get everyone else on board. And we've got everyone else doing it the same way and everyone else adopting that change. Otherwise, we haven't got anywhere. Right. And that's where job relations slots in straight away. And we've now got to drive a result through people.
Right. And think of this, this learner could be the supervisor for, say, a first shift operation. And there are two other ships, right? The same conversations
Who
we've had
dislike
around.
each other because of the history.
Right.
Reality.
Yep. Yep. And so how do you drive that? And I'm just going to go a little bit further with this, right? So again, that learner is working with their team members, you know, that critical element. So you're absolutely right. That learner has to embed the change through these people, right?
Yes.
So the learner and the team own the target and work to achieve it. But
Yes.
their coach is also there, you know, they're responsible for teaching the methodology of how to run the experiments and identify learnings from that, but also that coach is responsible for the results. So they're accomplishing work through the learner, and the learner has to accomplish work through others. So it's a real chain.
Exactly. If you just hold that slide, so those participants who are well practiced in job relations, you'll understand that there's a job relations line model that you do in the training in the first session. So if you think of that job relation line, and if you look at those two blue lines on there, think of those as job relations lines because they're there thick and fast. So there's a job relations line between the coach and the learner, and it's there all the time, and there's a particularly strong job relations line between the learner and the people involved in the process. And that line needs to be kept short and straight, because if it's not, the result looking for in this case, TK, is going to be very difficult to achieve.
Excellent. Yeah. So that's again, my epiphany is around this critical element of TWI, this job relations. Keep coming up because at the end of the day, we don't do this work directly.
No, we don't.
It has to be done through others. And that's true, Oscar, for the entire chain. So here's a chain of command or chain of, I call it accountability, because many of us have worked or are working in a matrix organization. And so typically these are direct reports. That's not always the case. And so let's take an example of a process operator. Is the learner learning about their process and are running experiments to overcome obstacles to achieve a target condition. They're being coached by, let's say, their supervisor, their direct manager, and they're responsible for the process level improvement, and this B character is coaching the learner A. But this individual also has a coach, and so they have a target condition they're striving to achieve, and they're being coached by, let's say, a value stream loop owner. As that individual is also, while he's B's coach, he's also a learner to maybe up the chain of his command, chain of accountability to a value stream manager who has very specific target conditions they're striving to achieve, which is also then a learner to, in this example, the vice president. And each one of these levels has a storyboard. Each one of these levels are a learner, and they're all striving for, that next level performance.
So just on that, Beth, because that's something I hadn't thought about a lot. Your daily cycles of improvement is occurring more down at the A level.
Correct.
You wouldn't be expecting daily cycles of improvement up at the CDE level, would you?
No. In many ways, like an example, down at the very process level, definitely daily, and all of these people should, we recommend practice daily at the beginning to embed the behavior. But once that behavior is embedded, these cycles may be weekly for the process supervisor, and maybe the value stream loop, they have monthly goals and objectives.
Yes.
Value stream manager might be quarterly, right? Yeah. It depends on their strategic level of responsibility on how frequently the cycles may be occurring.
Yeah.
But the point is, we want these routines to be as quick as possible, right? Because quick cycle improvement is what we're looking for, not a monthly cycle of improvement, but if we could take an improvement step every day, a day of learning or an activity of learning every day, that's what we're striving for. These routines also assure alignment of the entire organization's activities to the longer-term strategic goals and objectives of leadership. The routines give us something to practice to develop real skill, and I have found it's a great relationship builder between all the parties in this chain of command or chain of accountability, because they are all aligned and they are making this daily progress. You get some real sense of accomplishment and really strong relationship building. Right? But at the end of the day, the routines that are operationalized in Toyota Kata are there to create a new way of acting and thinking. At the end of the day, we want all these learners to be practicing at becoming more comfortable in their learning zone, which is unusual for humans. We like to be in that apparent zone of certainty. That's just the way we're programmed. It's the neuroscience tells us we like to be in our green zone here, our little comfort zone. But we try through this experimentation to get people out in their zone of uncertainty, what we call the learning zone, so they become more comfortable with it. And again, that means they can be striving towards a new level of improvement or a new level of performance they've never yet achieved. And we want to move away from the event-based CI model that many of us are familiar with and move towards an element of everyday striving towards improvement. And so at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to create with Toyota Kata. Make sense, Oscar?
It does make sense. Yes, thank you.
Okay. So could you tell us a bit more about TWI, and then kind of we'll talk more about that connection.
Sure, no problem. If you can just go to the next slide. So I'm making an assumption here that the people who are listening to this are reasonably well versed with TWI and the content of TWI. So there's three elements, three skills: job instruction, job relations, and job methods. The way we portray TWI, I was going to say sell it, reality that's what it is. This is the model we use when we're trying to convince or seeking to convince people of the importance of TWI. Is if you look at the left side of this whiteboard diagram, we represent TWI as a bridge. If you look at the left side of the diagram, in the black, we have management system documentation, and that might be your SOPs or work instructions or process diagrams, whatever it is that you use to capture what should be, which arrows down to. So your management system documentation represents what should be happening. If you look over on the right-hand side in black, we've got some people. They're the people in your organisation. They represent what's actually happening. Now, what normally happens in a discussion I'm having with people is I ask that question, what your people represent, and after 20 to 30 seconds of fishing, I usually get out what's actually happening. Someone says it in the room, and then someone usually laughs, and I look at them and say, why have you laughed? And they say, because that is us. We've got what should be happening, and we've got what's actually happening. And then my take is to bring it back to seriousness is that's probably not funny, because what you've got in between those two is a river of risk, which is the red in the middle. When you've got a gap between what's actually happening and what should be happening, then there's risk in the middle there. And the wider that gap, the bigger the risk. So we represent TWI as a bridge. The blue is the job instruction. The blue elements of the bridge is job instruction, which is the skill of teaching someone standard work. So TWI job instruction, the skill of teaching work. To strengthen that bridge, same principle as I was talking about earlier, is the skill of building leadership and respect, which is what job relations is about. When you try and close that gap between what should be happening and what's actually happening, the job relations aspect, job relations line is going to wobble. not everyone takes it on board. So there needs to be, the leaders need to have that skill of building leadership and respect. And that's why that's written in orange, and that skill strengthens the bridge, if you like. It'll be a weaker bridge without the skill of JR. And then the third aspect, and really it's not that relevant in this discussion, is the TWI job methods. In my experience so far, it comes way, we've only in Australia delivered 2 cycles of job methods, and that is because most organisations are not mature enough at this stage that we're working with they're not ready for it. And there's other vehicles for driving improvement. The principle of job relations is the skill of improving with just the resources you have available. I guess that's the only key part to emphasise, is that job methods is very much saying to the leader, what do I have available to me now, and how can I best organise that to get maximum results. So that's just a quick overview of TWI.
So, Oscar, if I could, when you were talking about the job method, that, again, that's, I think TK, Toyota Kata, the improvement Kata, is really grounded in that as well, in terms of we're going to experiment our way to a new level of performance, right, overcoming an obstacle. And
yeah, I think job methods,
right?
Yeah, job methods could be applied in the P of your PDCA cycles.
Okay. Yeah.
Certainly as a tool you could use in the planning.
Excellent. Okay, great.
So that's just a quick overview of TWI from the way we view it, the way we see it.
So let's talk a bit more about that connection then.
Okay, so if we look, I guess if you look at the previous diagram, job methods was at bottom left. As you just said, Beth, the improvement and coaching katas sits in that same place.
Right.
So job methods might even sit inside that purple circle. So I'm going to expand on this diagram in a couple of slides, but just to see where the improvement and coaching katas fit. In my view, is the improvement and coaching katas, they change what should be happening. So they don't change what's actually happening, not at the complete process level. The improvement and coaching katas change what should be happening. And a lot of organisations we see, and with due respect to the CI drivers, believe their job is done, and perhaps it is when they change what should be happening. But hang on, we haven't changed the organisation yet to get the results we want, because we've got to go over to the right-hand side and transfer that change into what's actually happening. So there is a gap. And that challenge, that's the real big challenge, and that where job relations comes in, as we'll discuss in a little while.
Okay. So again, let me just take it from the role of the learner, right? I'm doing daily experiments. So I look at this as almost 2 aspects. There's the learner, and I think I'm going to pop to the next slide real quick, Oscar, and if we need to come back to that. So the role of the learner, I'm going to be uncovering obstacles on my way to this target condition. I'm going to be experimenting, and I have found a way to overcome this obstacle. Now that's, that one aspect that now we need to make that change, and that change very often is around people's behavior. Sometimes it's changes, it's location changes, but at the end of the day, many times it's around changing someone's behavior process. Yep. And then just role of the coach, and I should also have on here the role of the second coach, is to change the behavior of the learner to do daily CI work, daily experiments, and the coach change their behavior to do daily coaching, right? So there's a lot of change going on as you deploy in an organization.
A lot of change, and we as humans don't embrace change well, even though we all do.
Right. So
just, I can give a good example of this. So there's a factory we were doing work at that packs a food product, and they had a machine called vertical form fill seal. So it takes the roll of plastic, forms it into a tube, and then puts the product inside. Every about 1.25 hours, they had to do a roll change for the plastic, change the plastic roll. And their target, it took them about 6 minutes to do that, anywhere between 6 and 8 minutes, and they had a target condition of getting that down to 4 minutes. So one of the experiments they did was to change the type of tape they used to join the two rolls. They were using double-sided tape, and they went to a single-sided tape, long story. So they did an experiment, and they found that single-sided tape was more effective for long story.
Okay.
Now, that's not the end of the road, because they had 3 shifts they had to get to do this way, and they had 2 operators on each shift. But they now have to get everyone to do it that way. And that's the hard bit. And that's where job relations and job instruction to a lesser extent, job instruction came in this case specifically, but that's where this stuff comes in. They did an experiment and found that it was better to use single-sided tape, and it was quicker for the operator to apply, so they could improve it by about 30 seconds. But now we've got to get everyone on every shift who does that roll change to do it that way. There is the challenge.
Yep. And I hear a lot, and that was a food industry.
That was food industry.
Food industry. So again, embedding that change.
Embed the change.
I also have a question, though, Oscar, and I get asked this a lot. So food industry, at least here in the States, it's a pretty regulated environment. Done a lot of work in pharmaceuticals. That's, again, highly regulated. At the end of the day, a lot of organizations are highly regulated. So how do you overcome in an environment where you're trying to do daily change, right, daily improvement, how do you overcome some of the regulatory aspects, right? I hear a lot about change management. You know, it can take weeks to set up a change in an SP, let's say. How do you overcome something like that?
I'd love $1 for every time I'd have this question. A US dollar. It's better, it's longer than our dollar at the moment. Now
just wait. That'll change. Up and down.
So, it's a very good question. The utopian answer, and I stress that word, utopian, is to have the people who are making the change capable of assessing the change. In other words, they've got the training and the skill to be able to say, does this impact a safety issue? Does this change impact a food safety, an OH&S issue? Does it impact a food safety issue? Does it impact a quality issue? If yes, then it has to go through a certain cycle. So, but the reality is, it has to bring in those document controllers and all systems and all that sort of stuff. And again, the utopian answer is, and this happened in this organisation I was referring to before.
Oh, okay.
Exactly that one. They have this issue. So, then my utopian answer is, hang on, you're practicing lean in this organisation. You're telling me it takes 4 weeks to change this document. The actual change time is 5 minutes, I would suggest. That's not very lean. So let's apply the lean process to the change process. Again, utopian answer, and usually the quality department don't get it. So I'm fighting that one. This organisation, what they've determined so far, but as it's building momentum, it's getting harder, is that the job instruction breakdown sits outside. Is a document owned by the trainer, the supervisor? Which in the training makes sense, because in JI you learn that it's a note from yourself to yourself. So the owner of that document is the supervisor, and they have the authority to change the content of the job instruction breakdown based on a process that says, does this change impact a CCP, a critical control point for food safety? If yes, involve the quality department. Does it involve a safety control point? If yes, involve the OH&S coordinator. The leaders have that process, and what that's done, it's give them ownership of the content of the breakdown. Whereas if it goes through the QA department and takes 6 weeks to authorise, then the person who needs to have that ownership doesn't have it. Unfortunately, that is reality, and I say my answer is you must address this. Why is it taking you 6 weeks? Because it should not be taking you 6 weeks when the actual do times, value add time is about 5 minutes. The ownership of these material must be at the level of which level at which it's used, and the skill of them to adjust those documents should be trained so that they're capable of doing it. That's the utopian answer, and it's something you must strive to achieve. Otherwise, you're going to get bogged down, and change will just grind to a halt. That's what will happen.
So in terms of Kata-like behavior, that that moving from a 4-week change process to a 1-week change process by 1 year from now, that's a great challenge, right? Now we
100% apply the improvement Kata and coaching Kata to how long it takes you to change your documents.
Excellent. Yeah, great. Okay, great. Thank you for that.
But be ready to take on the quality gurus, and I hope I haven't offended anyone. But be ready to take them on because they don't like it.
Yeah. Well, I started my professional career in quality, and my paradigm has shifted over the years on that role itself. So we all have to think about who is our customer, right? Who's our customer? So TWI, we said over and over again, it's the role of managers is not doers. The role of the supervisor, the learner, is to get results of people, and that I just keep coming back in mind. This job relations piece is about preparing individuals and even an organization for change.
100%. So to the point where myself and a fellow director with the Institute in Australia, one of the things you've got to be so careful of in Lean, continuous improvement, any game, is catchphrases and tools. And people, particularly in this country, and I think it's the same in the States, are starting to become fearful of just another tool. So, here we go, what's this TWI tool you're now going to throw at us? And so one of the things I've talked to Ben about is that we even stop, he's my fellow director, is that we even stop talking about job relations. We don't use the word because that's a tool. So what we say is, what we're starting to say to organisations, guys, is you need to, how do you get your results? You get it through people. So you need a results through people strategy. Yeah, that's what we need a results through people strategy, because every single one gets results through people. Person who's at the machine. They get the results by the way they run the machine or the task they do. Everybody else in the organisation gets the results through people. So guys, strategy, yeah, that's what we need. Oh, by the way, there's a thing called job relations, and this is the model. And it says that a good leader gets through others. And if we look down at this model, the results we're talking about is production, quality, safety. And in the Kata world, you're also getting improvement in change through the people on the floor. So if you accept this model, all these results come through people. And job relations teaches us that there's a line between us and the people. And I always say to people, organisations, is you can ignore that line if you wish, but believe you me, the line is there. So you can ignore it, but all you're doing is ignoring something that's there, or you can say it's something we have to do, we have to strengthen it, we have to shorten it, we have to straighten it. And if you accept that, then now let's have a look at this thing called job relations, which is all for achieving this strategy.
And this is kind of the TWI job relations aspect, or I like that, is through people strategy.
Yeah, so this is your strategy. So those of you out there who are familiar with JR, this will be nothing new to you. The two aspects of it are, one is maintain that JR line. Enlisted, they're not in the order of the pocket card. Some of you may notice that. But they're in the order of importance when you're thinking of improvement Kata, is my belief. So let each worker know how he or she is doing. And the first sub-bullet of that is figure out what you expect of the person. So right back before you start, what do we expect of our people in this improvement Kata, coaching Kata scenario we're going to have? What are we going to expect of each person? And then communicate it to them. Tell them in advance about a change that will affect them. So this is, our new expectation is going to affect you. And one of the things we often say there is note and tell people in advance about a change. People sometimes get lost in that is we're not negotiating a change here. You're not negotiating the change. Make a decision. We're the boss. You have to pull this. We're management. We have a change that's come. We're not negotiating, but we will tell you in advance about it, and we will do all we can to help you adapt to adopt this change. So tell people in advance about changes that will affect them is exactly how it reads. It's not negotiate a change that might affect you. It's we've decided to go down this track. Now we're going to talk to you about it. I'm going to help you adopt that change. So it's very strong in that. People get a bit lost there sometimes. And then give credit when due. Well, you can't give credit if you haven't determined what is expected of a person. So that's why it comes third. And then lastly, what we often find, as has happened at that food factory, is that through this process of improvement, Kata, you suddenly find someone who actually adopts this things naturally. And when you do that, for heaven's sake, grab hold of them and coach the hell out of them, because they're liquid gold for you. The other side of the JR card is inevitably you will have people problems in this program. When you're trying to change, convert what should be happening to what's actually happening, you will have people problems. One of the things that was a bit of an awakening for me, I used to say there's a 4-step method for solving a people problem. No way. And actually the pocket card says how to handle a problem.
Right.
So you don't always solve it, but there is a standard way of handling it when you have a JR line wobble, in other words, when you have a people problem. So you handle it in a certain way. And believe you me, when you're driving change, you will have people problems. So you better have a strategy of how you're going to handle them. Everyone the same way.
So
Standard work.
So I'm marking up my pocket card as we're talking. So,
Yes.
excellent. And let's move on. We're up
Yeah,
to
we're
our
running low on
so,
time, Beth.
yeah,
So.
I know. We're about 5 minutes over, but 10 minutes over. So we'll wrap this up and get to the Q&A. So the last piece, though, I think this is an element. Mike talks about this in the book, right? Toyota
Yes.
Kata, this difference on standard work versus standardized work. You want to explain a bit?
Yeah, very briefly. So job instruction certainly does have a big place. What my experience is with the Kata and that example I gave earlier with the vertical form fill and seal, great example. Job instruction was required there. They wrote a JOB they modified the existing JOB for the new way of using that tape, and and it was important because it was where the fingers were also held, where you actually placed your fingers. Using that time. The new JOB was written, and then the other two operators on each shift had to be trained. So they used job instruction to get from what should be happening as a result of the Kata experiment into what was actually happening. And it's embedded. The results are not achieved for the business until you have crossed that bridge. And you've narrowed that gap, and there's no difference between what's actually happening and what should be happening. So job instruction definitely has a place when Kata requires standard work to be changed, no doubt about it. The thing that was an awakening for me on this is the difference between standard work and standardized work. And Mike talks about in the book on page 114. But it really came to me, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Martha Puria from Virginia Mason. She called Getting to Standard Work in Health. She came out here about a year ago and did some seminars for us. And she said, and I'll never forget her saying, her understanding of TWI job instruction and this whole issue of standardized work and standard work was when she realized that standardized work is a verb, a doing word, and standard work is a noun, naming word. So when she realized that, she said, now I understand. The noun, the standard work, is the name for this pile of paper I've got on my desk. Standardized work is the verb for what people are actually doing out in the workplace. When I realized that, the penny dropped. And to me, that just says it all. And that's where job instruction comes in.
Yeah.
You must get the standardized work, otherwise you haven't got the results.
Yeah. Excellent. That's a great little epiphany there. Now and then.
Yeah, it was.
I like it.
It was for Martha, and it certainly was for me. As soon as she said it, I thought, gee, that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Excellent. So, excellent. So I'm going to wrap this up, kind of just our conversations that we've had and my little learnings going on. There is really a strong relationship between Toyota Kata in terms of that, that's radically changing, achieving these breakthrough objectives. And absolutely it has to be done through people. And that's where this job relation comes in, preparing the organization or get it down to an individual for change, right?
I think that's almost more important, Beth. It's preparing that individual. And that individual may be the operator on the next shift who's got to change the way they do something because they hate it. Mm-hmm. Operators hate it. They hate changing the way they do something.
Well,
most 99%.
Yep.
Don't forget about that guy. There's that person, that individual, that is the one who's got to do something differently to get the result. It applies almost more at that level. And they're the forgotten level.
Yep. Excellent. Well, thank you, Oscar. Every time we have a conversation, another penny drops for me as well. So I appreciate the time. To anybody who wants to learn more, there's a ton of resources out there. You can go to the W3 Group website. There's also the TWI Institute Australia. There's Lean Frontiers website, and in particular there are 3 summits or activities coming up that are posted on the Lean Frontiers website. We've got a Kata Skill Camp coming in April, where you can actually go to an organization, a factory in this case, and practice these routines of the improvement kata and the coaching kata on real operations. Hirschvogel in Columbus, Ohio is opening one of their operations to allow about 25 participants to come in and practice the routines of the improvement kata, coaching kata on their processes. The TWI Summit. Oscar, you're going to be there, right, at the TWI Summit?
Yep,
in May?
Jacksonville, yes, in May.
Excellent. And Brandon Brown will be there doing a pre-summit Toyota Kata experience using Buzz Electronics. So they run a full 8-hour workshop around Toyota Kata skill, which is a fun day. And then there's also in February a 2-day Kata Summit happening in Lean Frontiers is pulling that together, and it's going to be a really exciting couple of days. Mike and a great lineup of panelists from practitioners all around the world, so it's going to be fun. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jacqueline. I'm sorry we ran over, folks, a bit, but we have some time left for Q&A. I can stay on a couple minutes longer if need be. Jacqueline?
I can too.
Excellent. Thanks.
Thank you, Beth. That was very informative. So for the questions that were submitted, we actually only had one question, and that was, will the slides be made available? Yes, they will. Along with, we will record the session as well. So you'll be able to share the presentation with others in your organization and review it for yourself if you'd like. So after we end this webinar, you can look for an email from me, and we'll have a link embedded so you'll be able to review this. If you have any other questions that come up, we'll provide Beth and Oscar's contact information, so we'll be able to follow up with you on any additional questions that may come up. So again, thank you, Beth, and thank you, Oscar, and thank you, everybody, for listening and participating in today's session. Goodbye.
No worries, Jacqueline.
All right. Wishing you all success. Thank you, Jacqueline.
Thanks, Beth. Thanks, Jacqueline.
Okay. Bye-bye.